The COP28 climate summit is underway in Dubai, and I'm about to bring you some astonishing commentary from Hillary Clinton. We'll get that fact checked for you. The COP28 is the UN's two-week climate get-together attended by politicians, policymakers and business leaders from around the world, including the head of the International Monetary Fund, who again spoke about her desire to introduce carbon pricing. Kristalina Georgieva says carbon pricing will accelerate decarbonisation and it is also equitable.
We are a huge proponent of carbon price. We believe that carbon price has the potential of raising revenues in a way that is both equitable, because the more you consume, the more you pollute, the more you pay. And it is also an incentive to accelerate decarbonization. In other words, you would need less money because of consumption and production adapting to it.
Joining me now is energy expert and author of Fossil Future, Alex Epstein. Alex, what would a carbon price mean for the ordinary citizen?
I just wanted to say, yeah, Rita, great to see you again. It's been a while. So carbon pricing basically just means taxing. So it means every time you use energy that would normally be cheap, like coal or oil or natural gas, you have to pay more money. And if you want to think about the amount of money that it would take for them to get what they want, consider the fact that Europe already has a de facto huge carbon price. They tax the hell out of fossil fuels. They regulate the hell out of it. These guys want on the order of what they'll call like $1,000 a ton. So adding something like $10 a gallon per gasoline, and even that wouldn't get them what they want. So basically what they want to do is make cheap energy expensive so that we don't use much energy. But if we don't use much energy, then we're going to be really poor. So it's just really, really simple.
And when they talk about decarbonisation, what does that mean for human progress? What does it mean for living standards and also the ability to lift people, and in fact, entire countries out of poverty?
Yeah, decarbonization is a kind of euphemism, it just means don't use fossil fuels. But the reason why 80% of the world's energy is fossil fuels, the reason why fossil fuel use is still growing despite all the competition and all the hostility, is fossil fuels are uniquely good at providing low-cost, reliable energy for every kind of machine on a scale of billions of people in thousands of places. So at this point in history, decarbonization, since we don't have a near-term alternative, just means de-energizing, which means going back to a manual labor world. And we have billions of people who are using less electricity than a typical US refrigerator. We need more carbonization. We need more empowerment. And that, for the foreseeable future, requires carbonization. And that is infinitely more important. Empowerment is infinitely more important than climate change. Like climate change, you're talking about changing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, little warmer, a little cooler. It doesn't really matter if people have energy. And if people don't have energy, every climate is hell.
Well, according to Hillary Clinton, we're all going to die if we don't decarbonise. She made some remarkable claims about climate change, about climate deaths, and she's also called for gender-responsive climate policy. Let's have a listen.
We're seeing and beginning to pay attention and to count and record the deaths that are related to climate, and by far the biggest killer is extreme heat. I mean, even in Europe last summer, which has the ability to count and figure out what happened, they recorded 61,000 deaths because of the heat in Europe.
But Alex, the latest data I've seen, published in September of this year, in Lancet, mind you, shows that researchers estimate the excess mortality to be around 204,000 deaths attributed to cold and 20,000 attributed to heat annually in Europe. What do you make of Hillary Clinton's commentary there?
I make that there's just still a profound ignorance about a basic fact, which is that climate-related deaths are plummeting. I point out in my book, Fossil Future, and on energytalkingpoints.com, anyone can see the references for free. Climate disaster deaths are down 98% over the last 100 years. And if you want to talk about temperature-related deaths, in particular disaster and non-disaster, cold-related deaths, as you indicated, are a far greater problem than heat-related deaths on every single continent in the world. So what you can see here is just the huge bias that almost everyone on this issue has, which is that they only look for negatives about fossil fuels and they don't look for positives. So they ignore the fact that fossil fuels, insofar as they warm the earth, will obviously save more lives than lives taken away. And the biggest thing is they ignore the energy we get from fossil fuels, which we can't get as cost effectively from anything else, which helps us protect ourselves from every form of climate disaster and danger. That's why the death rate has gone down, because we've used fossil fuel energy to take the naturally dangerous climate and make it unnaturally safe. So Hillary needs to understand fossil fuels are a great thing for the climate, and decarbonization will make the climate deadly and it'll make everything deadly.
Well, at COP28, we've seen Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber facing a storm of criticism for saying there's no science behind the push to phase out fossil fuels. The activists are outraged, Alex. COP28 president also said that this was during a discussion he had with the former Irish President Mary Robinson back in November 21. He also said there is no science out there or no scenario out there that says the phase out of fossil fuels is what's going to achieve 1.5 degrees. And he also argued, Alex, that a fossil fuel phase out would hinder sustainable development unless you want to take the world back into caves. That's an interesting comment there. Timing of it was also very, very fascinating. Well, what do you make of his commentary? And I'm sure there'll be efforts to discredit him and to try to show that he didn't really mean what was said there.
I mean, he was definitely making the right kind of point, which is that anything resembling the rapid elimination of fossil fuels is impossible unless you want the entire world to regress and become poor and become endangered. So really going back to the cave. That's definitely true. Now, if you look at exactly what he said, what he's trying to say is, well, we can use fossil fuels, but we can somehow get rid of the CO2 very soon. And this is basically a farce from all the evidence we have. Maybe you can do that on a local scale, but we have no way of globally capturing all the CO2 in the near future. I mean, one example is in the United States, if you burn $30 worth of coal, right now we subsidize you $150 to put the CO2 underground. Is China going to do that? Is India going to do that? Obviously not. So CO2 capture is nothing resembling a globally scalable thing, which means that, yeah, we need fossil fuels to stay out of the cave, and we need CO2 emissions to stay out of the cave, and we got to get rid of this garbage 1.5 degree or 2 degrees target. This, by the way, is since the 1800s, so it means we can't warm a degree or half a degree. Otherwise, the apocalypse, even though warming a degree corresponds or correlates with the greatest improvement ever, this is just pseudoscience. So get rid of this fear of CO2, get rid of this fear of warming. Just admit fossil fuels are making the world an amazing place. They have some warming impact. It's insignificant compared to the benefits. And to try to get rid of that warming impact now means ruining billions of lives.
You mentioned the US there. We've got the Biden administration continuing to pursue its, extreme green agenda in some areas. There's been a pledge that the US won't construct new coal plants and will shut down existing ones. A special envoy for climate, John Kerry, announced at the summit on Saturday that we will be working to accelerate unabated coal phase out across the world, building stronger economies and more resilient communities. No timeline was given as to when the existing coal plants would be shut down, but what would that mean for American manufacturing, Alex, and for American consumers?
Well, first of all, let's just talk about what this orientation means. I mean, this guy is a fascist, right? He's basically saying I should have total control over the economy. So if I don't like coal plants, I get to shut down coal plants. So that itself is terrifying, that on climate grounds, you can just shut down any industry you want. Now, concretely, I've documented this. If people go to energytalkingpoints.com, search electricity emergency, we're in a catastrophic state in the United States where our grid is shorter than it's been in memory in terms of reliable electricity. So we're lowering the supply of it. We're increasing the demand for it with things like EVs and gas stove bans. And the thing that's preventing us from the abyss is our coal fleet. This is a very reliable fleet. We're totally depending on it. We've shut down too many plants already. We don't have viable replacements coming in the near future. And the Biden administration, despite participating in this catastrophe, wants to just create the apocalypse in terms of just shutting down all our coal plants. And the key is, it's the same thing over and over. They don't look at the benefits of fossil fuels. They just look at the negatives. And when you do that, whether it's with a prescription drug or fossil fuels, you're going to make catastrophic decisions.
Now, I want to get your take on last week's debate between Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida and California Governor Gavin Newsom. At one point, California's high gas prices were brought up and compared to Florida's, which saw Governor Newsom blame it all on big oil price gouging. DeSantis, in response, said it was California's government-dictated green energy policies that are driving up fuel costs. Let's have a quick look.
The average cost for a gallon of gas nationwide, just over $3.24. In Florida, $3.17. In California, it is a whopping $4.85.
And we've been ripped off by big oil. We continue to be ripped off by big oil.
California is the only one that oil companies are gouging. Why aren't they doing that to Georgia or Florida or these other states that have lower gas prices? Because of their policies. That's why people are paying more there. What Gavin Newsom wants to do, what he's doing in California, what Biden wants to do nationally is government-dictated green energy policies.
Alex, California really is a model of what we can expect if governments pursue this green agenda. They're talking about banning cars. You have to be forced to buy an electric car. Energy costs are sky high. Is it all because of government policy, or does Newsom have a point there about big oil price gouging?
He has no point. I mean, I think DeSantis put it out. I mean, basically pointed out this is just a conspiracy belief, right? You think that big oil somehow decided to gouge California, but they're not doing it to the other states. Like, if they wanted to quote gouge people, why don't they do it to everyone? And at the same time, Newsom gave more threats to big oil, like, hey, maybe threatening this industry that you depend on is causing higher prices. And I really like Governor DeSantis talking about government dictated green energy policies. I've actually almost never heard anyone besides me use that term. And it's a great term. Every politician should use it because it captures the whole green agenda. It's not about letting new, quote, green technologies compete. It's about dictating them to us, picking winners and losers, and deciding, hey, we are going to try this crazy experiment using only unreliable solar and wind and hope it works. And we're going to ban fossil fuels and restrict nuclear and just hope for the best. And government dictated anything isn't good. And government dictated energy policy that is obsessed and has a fetish with the least effective forms of energy, namely solar and wind at this point, is a total disaster. And I think DeSantis was totally right to name that and to point it out.
Alex Epstein, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Rita. Anytime.